Hi friends, hope you have done your exercises on pitches and clefs in the last video well. In today's video, let's learn about intervals. So what is an musical interval? An interval is the space between two pitches. Say for example, the space between C and E. The smallest interval in Western music is half step. You can also call it a half tone or a semitone. It is the distance between two adjacent keys on the piano. Now say, what's the note adjacent to C? If you said D, I am sorry, you are wrong. There is one black key in between. The distance between the C note and this black key is a half step. The distance between this black key and D is another half step. So the distance between the C and D is actually two half steps, simply a whole step. Two half steps equal one whole step. Intervals are typically measured the number of half steps between the two notes. Now let's name these black keys. The black keys are either called a sharp or a flat. Sharps and flats are halfway between the pitches represented by the white keys on your piano. A sharp is above a specific key, whereas a flat is below a specific key. A sharp raises the natural note by a half step. A flat lowers the note by a half step. So the black key in between C and D can be called either as C sharp or D flat. Similarly, the black key between D and E can be named either as D sharp or E flat. Between E and F, there is no black keys. Yet, if you go a half step above from E, you will land up on F. So F is nothing but an E sharp. Similarly, when you come down an half step from F, you will land up on E, which is nothing but F flat. Try to name other notes by yourself. Remember, if you go up a half step, you call it a sharp. If you come down an half step, you call it a flat. Take a look at this. You can see the black keys are given two names. Whatever you call it, when you press it, it will produce only one particular sound. So when two notes sound the same but can be spelled differently, they are called as enharmonic notes. A sharp and G flat are enharmonic notes. C sharp and D flat are enharmonic notes. D sharp and E flat are enharmonic notes, and further. The natural notes are the 7 basic notes from A to G, represented by the white keys on the piano. Any modification to a natural note is called a accidental. A sharp raises the pitch by one half step. A flat lowers the pitch by one half step. A natural cancels all the other accidentals. A double sharp raises the pitch by two half steps. A double flat lowers the pitch by two half steps. Take a look at these signs. Here, the C note is represented as a natural note. So we play C key on the piano. Now it has a sharp sign in front of it. A sharp raises the pitch by a half step. So you will have to play the C sharp key on the piano. Next, flat sign is placed in front of the C. Now you will have to play a note a half step lower than the C, which is B. The C natural cancels all other accidentals placed before, and you will have to play the C note as it is. If you observe clearly, you can appreciate that all other accidental signs are written in front of the main note. Now, when two notes of the exact same pitch are played by two different instruments or voices, they are played in unison. On the other hand, when two identical notes with the same name are played 8 degrees apart, they form an octave. From C to C, there are 12 half steps, which is 6 whole steps. They form an octave. The notes in any scale can be numbered in degrees. You will learn about scales in details in the next lesson. Now let's consider the simplest scale, C major. It contains only the white keys. The notes in the scale can be numbered as 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th. The relative position of any note from the first note corresponds to its interval. Consider E note in the C major scale. It is the 3rd degree of the scale, so it is a 3rd interval from C. Consider G note in the C major scale. It is 5th degree of the scale, so the interval between C and G is 5th. When measuring by degrees, the 2nd, 3rd, 6th and 7th notes can easily be flattened. When you flatten one of these notes, you create what is called a minor interval. The natural state of this interval in a major scale is called a major interval. Here, C and D is a major 2nd, C and E is a major 3rd, forget about the 4th and 5th now. C and EA is a major 6th, C and B is a major 7, and you know C and C is a octave. When you flatten the D, you will get a minor second C and D flat. When you flatten the E, you will get a minor third C and E flat. Similarly, you can get minor sixth and minor seventh. Certain intervals don't have separate major or minor states. It doesn't mean that we can't sharpen or flatten those notes. We can do so, but we don't name them as major or minor. These intervals exist in only one form, so they are called perfect intervals. Example, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, octave and unison. In C major scale, C and F is a perfect fourth and C and G is a perfect fifth. Now what we get when we raise or lower it by an half step? Definitely not a major or minor. Then what? Well, when you raise a perfect interval by a half step, it is called augmented interval. When you lower a perfect interval by a half step, it is called diminished interval. There are yet other ways to create augmented and diminished intervals. When you lower a minor interval by an half step, you get diminished interval. When you raise a major interval by a half step, you can get an augmented interval. So if C and F is a perfect fourth, then C and F sharp is an augmented fourth. If C and G is a perfect fifth, then C and G sharp is a diminished fifth. Let's summarize. Look, unisons, fourths, fifths and octaves are perfect intervals. When you sharpen them, you get augmented interval. When you flatten them, you get diminished intervals. Second, third, sixth and seventh are either a major or a minor interval. When you sharpen a major interval, you again get an augmented interval. When you flatten a minor interval, you again get a diminished interval. Intervals can also be counted depending upon the number of semitones between them. Minor seconds are 1 semitone apart, example C and C sharp. Major seconds are 2 semitones apart, example C and D. Minor thirds are 3 semitones apart, C and D sharp. Major thirds are 4 semitones apart, example C and E. The perfect fourth is 5 semitones apart, example C and F. The perfect fifth is 7 semitones apart, example C and G. Take note of all the other intervals from this table. Please remember this table, it will help you a lot. Till now, all the intervals we saw are well within an octave. Intervals that span more than one octave are called compound intervals because they combine an octave with a smaller interval to create the larger interval. Example, the 9th interval here is nothing but a second interval higher than an octave. Similarly, the 10th interval is a third interval an octave higher. Compound intervals can have all the qualities of smaller intervals. They can be major, minor, perfect, augmented or diminished. Here, the 9th, 10th, 13th and 14th intervals are either major or minor, whereas the 11th, 12th and 15th interval are perfect intervals. Well, in this module we have seen about intervals. Pause the video here and work out this simple exercise. Neat tip? Fine. Firstly, name the notes. If you don't know to name the notes, watch the previous video on pitches and clefs. Secondly, count the number of half steps between the notes. Then go back to the table and find out the interval. Check your answers in the description box. For more exercises, message me in Instagram. Like, share and subscribe. Meet you in the next video on scales. Cheers. Bye.